Okay, so in this situation, I've used masking techniques to create a kind of a semicircle around here, somewhat avoiding the fire because I didn't really want to change the color of the fire much, but I used a really soft, non-animated mask to change the red. Uh, Now the mask wasn't animated, but I did animate the effect using the timeline editor, which right now looks, a little cheesy if it was just left like that, because it's just a flickering going on and off with the red, and in some cases pulling down the blue and very subtle alterations with the green just to cause a bit of a flickery glow coming from this fire. I do realize that it's a little over exaggerated, but I did that on purpose, not just for the sake of over exaggeration, but also because I'm going to be putting more stuff on here. Also using masks, and again, this was not an animated mask, and it wasn't just one mask or one pass with the fire here. In Howler, we can load animations into the brush with load sequence, or you can do like an AVI to animated brush. There's all kinds of different ways. This is a very brush-centric software. I basically created some blurred masks to get flames underneath the planks on this palette. Let's take a look at what that looks like. And this fire is a very subtle fire that I created in Carrara. And you can see that the effect here that the fire is giving this piece of wood that is actually a solid piece of wood that cranks right on through here, it gives a really nice kind of a natural burning effect, even though the fire doesn't look all that believable on its own. When you back off and look at the shot as a whole, it's not so bad, even though it still doesn't look all that believable. It doesn't really seem to take your eye away saying, oh look, that's really fake. But if you do look at it, you will notice that it is fake. However, okay, so that's where I got so far with that. Just to demonstrate how that was done, I'm going to grab my lasso tool again, and now I'm going to put a few little flames flickering up. Let's see, his hands are right here, and what's going on with this? Okay, so now let's put a few flames flickering up on this side of the wood. Okay, so I really like some of this effect, so I don't want to overdo any of that, and I do want to just keep this really subtle. So I'm just going to make a shape something like that, which again isn't much. It's all about subtlety here. Now I'm going to, like we've seen before, there's nothing new here, but notice if I drag this up like that, how it looks like a little blob. Just so you know, there are some gradient selections going on beyond this little blob. Some of the details that you draw in with that lasso tool will still be taken into effect. However, I'm zoomed way in on this, and I really don't need much of a blur. I just want some blur to make it so that it's not quite so stark of a composite here. So just about as little of a blur as I can get on there, and that's good. Now what we do is we go into animation, brush keyframer. Now we basically have an animation menu here where I can take the brush, which is an animated flame, and it's pretty big. If I took off the selection, you'd be able to see how big this is, but I'm going to go ahead and bring the scale down to say what has been working really good is anywhere between 13 and 19. I could probably go a little bit bigger too. Okay, and see here as I drag it up, you can see that I'm full on into that mask. And what I actually want to do is to get the tips of this alpha channel that's in the brush to not quite reach that. So I go up to where I see that it's pegged, and then I bring it down a little bit. And now this is the most intense part of that brush, that animation. I think I might even introduce a little angle the other way, just so that there's a little bit of wind effect going on. Okay, now I'm going to set a keyframe, and you can play it through now. I don't really think it needs to move or anything, so I'm going to go ahead and render that. And there's different things that we can do in this brush keyframer. Like for example, you can go in and set different keyframes, change the scale throughout, change the angle, change the opacity. You can set things along a path. You can apply motion blur, change the shutter speed, change the processing type. You can track your brush to create a motion path. It's really a pretty powerful tool here. Now I'm going to get rid of that selection and see what happened here. Okay, see, now that was exactly what I wanted to do, is just to get some flames on this side of the wood. So there again, this was just a little exercise. Since we're working on adding mobs in this way, you know what the assignment is if you've been in this class with me here. And so I was all done with it as far as what we were supposed to do, is adding all of these different people in here. But I saw this little element here, and I'm sure they put that in there just for that, is for us to take with what we will and play with it if we want. Let's try and make this whole thing more believable. We're going to diminish some of this glowing effect going on here, as well as some of the unbelievability of this fire. And we're going to do that by adding a smoke element. I've prepared an animated brush using Carrara again. For those who like using presets, you can yell at me now for not grabbing a preset. I'm actually going to use something that I created using a particle emitter, and then filmed it with an alpha channel, so the smoke was the particle emitter was the only thing in the scene, so that I basically rendered it onto a clear background. And you see this blinking going on. It's loading in each image of the animation. It's an image sequence. And that'll be done in a second. And what we're going to do is we're going to try and composite this smoke over the top of this. And I should mention too that the way I created the smoke was more in a stock footage type of situation. I wasn't actually thinking of trying to make it for this scene. I was trying to make it just like a generic type of a thing. Create a safety real quick. Alrighty, and now I'm going to get to that brush keyframer, and so you can see my smoke there. And you know, it's pretty white for smoke, but that's what I made. A little we're going to get it right into that fire, just barely. We're basically introducing a little bit of wind in the same direction as what I did with those flames that last time. Basically, when flames are at their most intense is usually when there's a little less smoke. So we can bring this opacity down right here. Now we're going to set a keyframe and pull this forward a little. You see that really looks pretty cool. And so right here I want to keep that same effect, so I'm going to set another keyframe. And then as the flames start to diminish, I think I'll bring the opacity back up a little bit. If I want to add a bunch of opacity, what I can do is create a second layer of this smoke with a really super soft mask around him, so that some of the smoke is coming from behind him. So I think we're going to experiment with that. Let's bring this opacity up a little bit more though. And see, you can see the keyframes showing up as little red dots there, so you can always get back to them if you need to change them. See, and now I'm going to make it a little bit more subtle once again. Keyframe that. But see how this overlay here is definitely going to help diminish this this crazy coloring that I did there, but also that crazy coloring that I did is going to help make this overlay, so much nicer. It'll be peeking through in a very subtle way, and I could also be animating the scale, but I'm opting to not do that at this point. And set my final keyframe, come back to the beginning, and I could play this right through again just to double check it, but instead, to save time for this tutorial type of thing, I'm going to just click render and we'll take a look at it and see how that plays through. And then I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do like I just imagined, is I'm going to make a subtle mask. Why don't I clear all keyframes here? Get rid of this thing, or I could just bring it down here. And I do want to get at my play controls here and take a look at how that. See, so that's kind of cool. Yeah, that's really pretty neat, actually. Okay, so now what we can do is take my lasso tool, and I'm going to make a mask like that. Now I'm going to actually shift select this part here, adding it to my selection, because I'm going to be blurring the heck out of this thing anyway, so might as well include all of that stuff. This time I'm using a really heavy Gaussian because I want to reduce the effect of this mask. So let's actually take a look at the selection and see. It is kind of gray, but I'm going to actually make it even less of a selection than that yet by increasing that again. How about something like right in there, just so I can bring that back if I want, even though I really don't need to. I could just simply draw the thing again. Okay, this is more what I'm looking for, so I'm going to get rid of these, and now I'm going to run this thing. Oh wait, what we want to do is go selection, invert selection. So basically we're just kind of protecting a little bit of this from being entirely covered by this thing. Now I think I'm going to angle that back and maybe scale it up, get it more in here. There again, a lot of times you're just going for subtlety. You're not going for complete replacement or anything. You try bringing the scale down even more. Just a more isolated bit of smoke. And maybe even try bringing the opacity back up a little bit. guess maybe right here I might bring the opacity down. Set a keyframe. And then bring it back up just a bit. And then maybe bring it back down for a bit more subtlety. Now, okay, and then you just take it and render through. Yeah, I really like how this smoke is kind of dissipating and then this is carrying on. So a really neat thing that would have been nice, now that I'm seeing it in hindsight, is if I would have made a larger one yet the first time and used the multiply for that dark, just to get that as a basis to then put these lighter ones in an opaque mode on afterwards. But yeah, I'm gonna save this thing out and look forward to next week's homework assignment. Thanks.